In this lecture, I'll talk more in detail about referencing. I've already made a lecture which is more basic introduction, so you should see that one first. But if you have seen that, then we're ready to get into some details. And I understand that if this is the first time you're introduced to referencing, it's quite massive. One can be overwhelmed because there's so many details. So don't worry. Usually you'll be using the same sorts of sources, books, articles, internet pages, and so on. And so you learn that, and you don't need to pay so much attention to the other details. But I show it now so that you can know where to find stuff if you need to. If you suddenly meet a new kind of source, a new kind of reference, if you face problems, then you know that you can go to either this movie or you can go to the document in Fronter that I'll be showing on the screen here. And you can also go on internet to read about this reference style that's called APA 6. So that's the best way to learn. Look at some basics, start writing, and then when you face new problems, you can find the answer then. So, I'm going to talk about 3 things now in this lecture. First, I'm going to talk about in-text citations. That's when you put parentheses in your text and say where you have found this or that source. Then I'll be talking about the list of references at the end of your essay. And then finally, I'll use some examples. I'll show an original text and then give different comments to how one could have presented that on one's own. And then say, well, this wasn't that good. This presentation have this and those problems. Okay, but we'll start with in-text citations, and this is a document that you'll find in Fronter called Formal Guidelines. It's in the exam room in Fronter, Class Fronter. Okay, first then, if you are referring a book and it's just a general presentation of a book, you're just saying this book is about this or that, then you can just write the name and the year. You don't have to put on page numbers. But most often, you will be referring to something specific, which are written on one page or another, and then you should also write the page numbers. So for instance here, Grimen discusses this and that, and then the parenthesis, Grimen 2004, page 289, pp. That means and the following pages. So you can use that if it's roughly in that area. That's not so exact, so the best is to write exactly which pages it is on. So Grimen discuss this and that, 2004, page 293 to 299. So if you have a hyphen here, that shows from this page to that page. This is the exact place where it's written about that. That's the best. And if you only refer to one page, then it'll be like this. Grimen 2004, page 300. These were examples where the author has written the whole book himself or herself. But if you have an editor of a book and different authors have written the different chapters, then if you cite one specific chapter or page, then you should refer to the person who's written that article. You should not write the editor's name, but the author of that chapter. So for instance, if Fredheim has written a chapter in a book edited by another person, you should still refer to Fredheim 2010, who writes about this and that. If you make a direct quote, then you have to show the reader that this is a direct quote. It's not just my own paraphrasing, my own words. This is a direct quote. And there are 2 different ways to do that. The first is that you use quotation marks. Let's see. Furuseth and Repstad discuss different methodological questions and what they call methodological agnosticism. This is a special phrase, so the person has chosen to quote it. And then you have the quotation marks here, showing that's a quote. And here's the reference. We use quotation marks if the citation is less than 3 lines long. But if you have a long citation, then you don't use quotation marks. You use indentation instead. You indent the whole paragraph. So for example here, Furuseth and Repstad write, and here comes the quotation, and you see it has been indented, and here's your own text again, your own words. So it's been, you have indentation here, and then the reference. After a citation, after a direct quote, it should always be a parenthesis saying where is this from. Sometimes you write a book and the person who's written the book is talking about another person. So if you want to refer to a person who is referred by another person, you have to put up both persons, or both should be mentioned. And you should put up the source where you found it then. So for instance, if you read a book where, for example, Gunnar Åkvåg writes about Pierre Bourdieu, you should do it like this. Bourdieu argues that good social science requires both an objectivist and a subjectivist break. And then you refer to Åkvåg's book, because you haven't read Bourdieu's book, you have read Åkvåg's book, and then you should give him credit for finding this. Of course, you may find the original source for yourself and read it, and then you can just cite Bourdieu. But if you don't read the original, then you should cite Åkvåg. And that could be wise, because maybe he has been referring wrongly. He has misrepresented what Bourdieu actually says. That happens quite a lot. So that's why people who are doing PhD, professors and so on, will usually go and check the original sources to make sure that it's not wrong. But we don't expect that from you, but you should write it like this then. If it's a direct quotation from one author is quoting another author and you want to use this original quote, then again, you put both persons in the reference. So let's say that Åkvåg has quoted Bourdieu. Then it will be like this. Bourdieu was critical to the theory not connected to empirical studies. He called it theory for the sake of theory. That's a quotation, and it's made by Bourdieu, quoted in Åkvåg, and then year and page. As I said already, if you're referring to an edited book, you should the reference should be to the person who wrote that chapter that you were quoting. And then, in the end, in the list of references, you'll put both the author of the chapter and the editor of the whole book. And I'll show that afterwards. Many students now use internet. And at the internet, you'll find very many different kinds of presenting text. So sometimes there will be an author, and sometimes it's not. And sometimes there's a title, and sometimes it's not, etc. So what you need to do is just try to make it as similar as normal book or article references as you can. If there is an author, find the author's surname and use that. If there's a year, put that as well. And if it's a title, use that in the list of references. But if you don't find it, then you can't put it, of course. So you just have to write as much as you can. So here are some examples. Let's say you have found a page at the internet where you have both the surnames and the year. Then you can write it like this in the text. Novak and Seierstedt, that's the names, 2003, they have investigated blah, 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 blah. And then in the list of references, you put their names, the day, the year, and even date if you have it, then the title of the text, and then you say retrieved from, and then you put the web page there. If you think that the web page is likely to remain the same forever, you can just do it like that. If you think that this is a kind of web page that changes constantly, they revise and update, etc., you should also put what date you retrieved this. Retrieved 4th of August 2012 from this web page. Because maybe someone wants to check you and they go to look at this web page and something else is there. And they say, well, you haven't... this was a wrong presentation that you have given of this text, but you could say, no, I retrieved it 2012, and then that was what it said. And if it's a discussion, you'll have to ask the authors, etc. But that helps that. If you don't find the name of the author, or if you don't find the year, etc., you can't write it. But then if you don't have the author name, then you'll just use the title of the text instead. So Freud is considered as this and that, psychoanalysis 2010. And then you write psychoanalysis 2010 was found in Encyclopedia Britannica at this web page. So you just do as good as you can and go to the internet to find examples and references or on different kinds of internet pages, because there you'll find it in massive detail, but we haven't bothered to put in that much detail here. People will have different opinions on this, but we have decided to give this advice to our students, that if you have conversations with teachers or they hand out notes in the class, you don't have to put that up as a reference. But if they've put in the written material, usually a class fronter, then you should do it in the normal way, where you write the name of the teacher, the year, and then the date or the online address for fronter. So that was in-text citations. So now we move on to the list of references. You make the list of references and you make it alphabetical, ordered by the surname of the authors. If you have a book, you do it like this: surname and then comma, first name, the year that it was written, colon, title of the book, social science, and you put on the edition as well. You don't have to write first edition, but if there's second, third edition and so on, you should put that, because in the different editions there will be different page numbers. Different text is on different page numbers, so if we want to check, we need to know which edition should we check. And then city where it's published and the publisher, Oxford University Press. If you have a book with several authors, not just one, then you'll use the first author mentioned on the book, surname first, Johnson Jack, and then the other authors will have their first name first, Harold Jackson and John Harrelson. Year it's been written, introduction to social science, edition, etc. Note that you should write which edition of the book it is, but you don't have to write which printing it is. If it says fourth print, never mind, then the book will be identical. It's just been reprinted and all the page numbers, everything is the same. But if it's a new edition, then you need to put on which edition it is, because then the pagination will be different. If we then have a book with different authors writing the different chapters and one editor for the whole book, then you put the article or the chapter that you have been use that first, and then say the name of the whole book afterwards. So for instance, if Kjetil Fredheim had written this article called Moral Principles and Participation in Practice in this book, which was edited by Bård Mæland, and you put a parenthesis to say that he's the editor, and then you have the name of the whole book in italics. So the name of the chapter or article is not in italics, but the book title is in italics, and then you put the page numbers for to show where in the book you find this chapter or article, and then published in New York at a publisher called Peter Lang. If you have journal articles, they also should just be written in normal text, but the name of the journal should be in italics. So here again, Kjetil Fredheim has written this article, Egoistiske idealister, and it's in this journal, International Politics. And here is the volume, 65. This journal has then been, in 2007, they had been going on for 65 years. So this is the volume. And these are the page numbers. Sometimes you'll also write which number, if it's number 4 that year, one will write sometimes, but at least volume and page numbers. If you refer to a newspaper, you list that as well. Here's the author of the article in the newspaper. This is the date that the newspaper came. Here is the title of the article, and then the name of the newspaper and which page it was on. Yes, I did mention how we want to put internet references. These are the same that we looked at before, so I'm skipping them now. You may also have used other kinds of sources than ones mentioned here. Maybe you have talked to someone, made notes from a lecture, seen a movie at the TV or something. So again, try to look at the internet to find out how these different sources should be referred. Try to make it look as similar to book and article, etc. as you can. And sometimes it will be a bit difficult to know exactly, should I have this or that? This isn't an exact science. People disagree. That's life in academia. Everybody disagree about everything, but you'll need to find out as good as you can how you want to do it. And you should try to follow the rules where there are rules, but sometimes people disagree and there will be bits more blurry rules. But at least now you've seen the main things. I'll mention also how to refer to biblical texts. And we've put a list for you here. Name of the book, and then between chapter and verse, we use a colon to show that it's this is a verse and this is a chapter. If there are several verses in a row, you can have a hyphen between them. If you have different verses from the same chapter, you have a comma between them. And here there's from chapter 1 to chapter 3. Here it's from chapter 2, verse 23 to chapter 3, verse 21. And you use a semicolon to distinguish between different texts. And in this document, we have even given the standard English abbreviations of all the books in the Bible, so you can know what's the standard abbreviation as well. Then finally, some examples of how and when to cite references. What I've done here is I've picked out an original text from a book. Here it is. And then I've made 10 different presentations of that text. So if you want to, you may pause here. You can find the text at fronted, or you can, maybe it's not so easy to look at the screen, but you can try to give a presentation, write the references, and see how you do. See how similar you are to the different types that I mentioned here. Otherwise, just look and learn. Let's see. Here is the first example. Roughly 100 BC, blah, 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 blah. If you take a look at this and look at the original text, you'll say that it's exactly the same. It's a direct quote, but there's nothing showing that this is a direct quote. This is the worst you can do. That would be considered plagiarism and cheating. So you should not take the direct text and not show that you have done so in the texts. Next example. Again, it's the same text as in number 1 and as in the original. This time, there is a reference. And you have been citing a source, but there's nothing here showing that it is a quotation. So if someone reads this, they will think that these are your own words, but you are referring or paraphrasing something that the author Svare has written first. So again, that's considered plagiarism. You need to show that this is a direct quote. And if it's a quote that long, it should be indented. Yes. Then we have a text which is again directly the same as in the original text, but this time it's shown that it is a quotation because we have quotation marks. So now everything is formally correct. You will not be taken for plagiarism or cheating, but it's not good to have such long quotations when you don't need it for anything. If it's not a special phrase, it's not something that you're discussing or using, etc., then it's not good to have long quotations. Then the person giving a grade will think that this is a lazy student who's just sitting and cutting and copying and pasting, and maybe he hasn't even understood what it says. So you should mainly use your own words and paraphrase. Let's see. Number 4. Augustine had a negative view of the body. He held that the body tempted the soul away from God and dragged it down to the swirling mists of lust. This is a special phrase then, or a bit of poetic way of saying it. So here one has then, it was Augustine who said this, but he has been quoted in Svare at this page. And then Augustine was also influenced, etc. So now, here one could have just had one reference at the end, but since it's a quotation in the middle, you need to have a reference directly after the citation. And because it's Augustine who had the original quote, we do it like this then. Augustine quoted in Svare. Let's say. Roughly 100 BCE, North Africa was conquered by the Romans. The Romans started plowing the earth. It became the grain chamber of the Roman Empire, feeding the population with cheap grain. Here was the little town of Tagaste, where Augustine was born in 354 CE. If you compare this with the original text, you'll see that it's very similar. So let's see, first sentence, roughly 100 BCE, North Africa was conquered by the Romans. And in the original text, it says roughly 100 BC, North Africa was conquered by the Romans. They started plowing the earth on a grand scale, and North Africa became the grain chamber. And here it says the Romans started plowing the earth. It doesn't say on a grand scale, etc. So it's very close. Some students will do that. They sit with a book and they write and they change a few words. Take out one, maybe put in a synonym here, etc. That's too close as well. That will also be considered as plagiarism if you just change a word here and there, because obviously you're sitting with a book beside you and writing what it says. So there needs to be quite some distance between the original and what you write. So when you write the presentation and so on, after you've read the book, you should shut it, put it away, and then write from your own memory. Then you can check later and see if you did something wrong, etc. But you should not just write sentence by sentence from the book. Make a few changes, not to be caught by this system that we use, FRS. It takes that as well. It uses synonyms, and it says, so this and this many percentage is the same. So it's not a way to avoid being caught for plagiarism. So it will be plagiarism if you don't put in a reference. If you put in a reference, you won't be caught for plagiarism, but the people giving a grade will not give a good grade. They will say, you're too dependent on the original text. We don't know if you have understood it, so you need to use your own words. That's part of the job, that you should show that you know this and present it to us in a good way. Example number 7. Augustine was born in North Africa, 354 AD, was raised as a Christian by his mother. At the age of 16, he went to Carthage to study. And here I was. When he started studying, he left Christianity. This is an exposition or a presentation then, in your own words. It has a reference in the end, so all is fine. Then, example number 8. He was born in North Africa, 354, raised as a Christian. At the age of 16, he went to Carthage. There, Augustine met many temptations, and he admits in his autobiography that he enjoyed life, and especially the bodily pleasures. New page. When there are different sources, there should be different references. Here one could have said page 134 and 142 or 200. One could have skipped this one and just had one common source here. If it had been 2 different books, you would have to have 2 different sources. If it was all from the same pages, you could have just one reference in the end. Number 9, Augustine had a negative view of the body. He held that the body tempted the soul away from God. Then a reference. Here we see another example of how Augustine in his theology emphasizes what was considered rational in his own time. It's good to try to make it clear when it's you who are talking and when you are referring someone else. And then one can use techniques like this, that one puts a reference. Maybe one says, according to Svada, or Svada argues this and that. I, on the other hand, think that, or like this. So it's clear to the reader that now it's a presentation of a book, and now it's the student who is talking. Because sometimes we don't know, do you mean this, or do you mean that Plato or Jesus or someone else means this? So try to make it clear who is talking. And then finally, example number 10. Augustine had a negative view of the body his whole life, reference to page 142. He had to fight desires his own life, reference page 142. The problem with the desires of the body is that they tempt us away from God, page 142. If it's the same reference every time, you don't have to put one after each sentence, then it'll be enough with one reference at the end of the paragraph. So this is too much, even for me, who likes to have a lot of quotes and references. Yes. Don't be sad because there's so many details. It's good to try to learn this from the start. It will look professional, and you can use that always later in your studies. Just try to learn the basic stuff now, and then when you face new problems, you can learn more about that. You can go to Fronter to look at this document, the formal guidelines. If there's something you're wondering about and it doesn't say there, you can send me an email and ask. But you can also go to the internet, where there's lots of pages presenting the APA 6th style and saying how one should deal with different sorts of problems. So use Google and you'll usually find the answer to your question. Thanks.